And I was thinking on a weather day here, obviously it's a weather day. We're kind of short here. There's a few empty chairs, which is surprising, but it's a weather day. So often, at least in my past, you'd hear the priest or the deacon, well, priests mostly say, hey, I'm going to keep the homily short because so everybody can get home. Like that's going to happen. So I thought, well, wait a second. I think we can figure this out. So Father offered, you see the big machine out in the lobby? Anyone who needs a lift after Mass, see Father Michael, he'll give you a ride. So it's got those big tires on it. You get that? Everybody follow what I'm saying here? All right, well, anyway, I better get to it because it's long. No, it's not. Today's gospel, my dear friends, you just heard it. Pretty sobering gospel, right? Pretty sobering. Love your enemies. Really? Forgive. Oh, yeah, deacon. Forgive, love, do good to those who hate you. Pretty easy. Rolled off my lips real easy. I act, oh, yeah, nothing to this. We all do that, don't we? You know, to me, friends, this gospel almost seems like it is from a different time, but it certainly is not relevant to us anymore here today, is it? Is it? Love your enemies and all of that? Pretty clearly, the injunctions of Jesus here, what to do, how to live, have been rejected by many of all of us at times. Maybe that's the human condition. Maybe that's why we're here in church, to hear it again, what we should be doing, what I need to be doing. So he says, love your enemies. Violence, violence, and violence. It's everywhere. Am I right? At least it seems like it. I don't know. I mean, is it the news media? Is that all we hear? I think there was a murder yesterday in Green Bay. There's one in Appleton. There's one in Oshkosh. There's one. This is our community, right? I grew up in this community. I do not remember murders when I was a kid. I don't. Perhaps there were, but there's violence everywhere. It's almost like some violent stream is aimed at us. And so you see violence everywhere. And so when Jesus says, love your enemies, well, like the ring's kind of hollow. What? And we see violence everywhere. Then he said, do good to those who hate you. Really? Well, I'm not too good at that. I know that. Like if somebody hates you, which is a hard word. Hate is a hard word. It is, isn't it? I hope I'm not that hateful. Boy, I hate you. When you hear somebody say that, it's awful. But there is hatred out there and bigotry and all the rest of it. I get that. And I'm part of it at times. Do good, he says, to those who hate you. So many harsh words, right? On social media, I guess it's just full of it. Harshness. Facebook. Harshness. I'm not on Facebook. I don't want to be on Facebook. That's another story, but you know me. I just don't want any part of that. I'm harsh enough. I don't need any more harshness. I don't. I have enough of it in my life, and so do you. Jesus says, do good to those who hate you. Pray for them. Do not be harsh to them. And then he said, bless those who curse you. Well, I said last night, I was trying to tune my ear. I hear lots of cursing. Some of it comes from me at times. Don't you? You high school kids here, remember, if you were in my class for a couple of years, I always would ask the class at the beginning of class, right after we prayed, how many times did you hear the blank word today? I would ask them that. The Hortonville kids, our kids. And once he says, sorry, Brian. Yeah, it wasn't for me, though. And they would tell me hundreds of times in a school day. They would hear cursing, foul, taking God's name in vain. You do hear it too, don't you? Do you hear it? Somebody's saying yes, good. One person. I hear it. I'm part of it sometimes. I get upset and I use language I should not use. The problem is, I don't hear a lot of blessings during the day. Do you? Who blesses each other? Who does that? There's one, good. We got one out of 200, 100 people. Well, good, we're doing pretty good. I hear cursing, but I do not hear blessings. And Jesus says, bless those who curse you. Don't hold grudges against them. Here's a little story I uncovered about forgiveness I thought was pretty good. During the Revolutionary War, this fellow, Peter Miller, he was a pastor of a little church in Pennsylvania, this insignificant guy. And near his church, this Peter Miller, the pastor of the church, near it lived a guy who was constantly criticizing and abusing Miller and the whole congregation, like he would stand outside and make fun of us as we come out of church, I guess, that kind of thing. And so this critic at one point, the story goes, it's a true story, was found guilty of treason, and he was sentenced to death. This guy that we don't like too much here. And no sooner was the sentence announced than this guy, Peter Miller, this pastor, set out on foot to appeal to General George Washington, of all people, for his enemy's life. So he walked from wherever he was, about 60 miles, to Philadelphia, where Washington was, to appeal for this guy's life. When Washington replied that he could not grant his appeal for his friend, Pastor Miller said, my friend, he is the worst enemy that I have, that I can think of. What? Declared Washington. You have walked 60 miles to save the life of an enemy? That puts the matter in a whole different light. And I pardoned him. That's a pretty nice story, isn't it? I mean, on many levels. This pastor would not let his heart be hardened. So if we had some guy out here giving us, bad stuff, I'd probably get a couple of you guys together and say, let's go out and take care of this guy. I shouldn't be saying that, right? But there's part of us wants to do that. But my dear friends and young people, with the Lord, somehow this Pastor Miller forgave the guy. He not only forgave him, he thought it was worthy to walk 60 miles to ask for a pardon. That's Christ. That's what Jesus does for us. That's true forgiveness. That's kind of what we're called to do. To forgive an enemy, to forgive even a friend at times, is perhaps one of the hardest things we can do. C.S. Lewis, the great writer, wrote, everyone says forgiveness is a lovely idea until they have something to forgive. I want you to forgive them, but when I have to do it, it's a whole different story. Do we right now bear unforgiveness in our hearts? You and me, do we? From past hurts, from people that have hurt us and will perhaps continue to hurt us. Do I forgive them from my heart? One of the points of forgiveness, friends, as you know this, it's a crucial component to being spiritually healthy, right? I think everybody gets that, right? It's crucial. Why? Because if I hold a grudge, then I carry it around. And there's part of us, part of our culture now, that I think even would attest to say to us, well, forgiving is kind of a sign of weakness. Don't stay away from that. But forgiveness is not weakness. But it's very difficult to do. I've told this story before. It's kind of difficult for me, at least even when you go to confession. Why? Because you have to confess your sin, my sin. Not your sin, my sin. And that's why my hands get I get a little sweaty in my palm when I'm ready to go to confession. Why? Because I actually have to do it. I have to kind of walk down, go over there, go in that door, and say, hey, I'm a sinner. Now, the same rules apply with forgiveness. If I need to forgive one of you, which I probably do at some point, I would literally have to go up to you or do something, write you a letter, at least something, some act that takes courage to do, doesn't it? Because I'd rather not do it. I might forgive you, but I really don't want to say anything. I kind of avoid, and maybe that's wisdom at some times, but often it's not. And so for us just to smile at one another, an enemy, somebody you're not getting along with. Because when you smile at someone, have you ever said to yourself, I say this to my wife all the time, I waved at that guy, and he didn't wave back. What a jerk. Well, and that's kind of unforgiveness on my part. And that's my own pride. Because when you take, you see, if I risk saying hello to you and you blow me off, you feel weird. You do. I get that. But that's growth. You see, at some point, my wife can say to me, grow up, will you? And she says a lot, but that's what happens. So forgiveness is crucial to us. It's crucial to us. Recently, I heard this story of a man who said, I feel like a person that has two creatures that live inside of me. Maybe we all feel like this. One of the creatures is kind and forgiving, a lovely person. The other one, on the other hand, is vicious and vindictive and totally unforgiving. And there's like a little war going on. And the man wondered, he said out loud to his friends, I wonder in the end, which of these two creatures will triumph, will win? And one of his wise friends said to him, my dear friend, the one will win is the one that you feed. The one that you feed. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? You cannot feed the bitterness, the anger that we see out here today. And it keeps being fed more and more and more. And each of us at times, please God not, I do. I lend my voice to that feeding. I lend food to that ugliness. That's what happens. And it spreads from you and me. Anger, resentment, bitterness, judgmental, all of it from me at times. So the point of all of this, I think, my dear friends, is that we need to petition our Lord. If you look, we always look here. He is. Again, this week, he will be on this altar soon. Body and blood, soul and divinity. And this is a sign of God's forgiving you. Do I need forgiveness? Do you? Even that, I'm not sure I pondered that as much as I should have. Hey, I'm a pretty good guy. I'm okay. Do I need? He did this, he says, this unspeakable act that was done to him. He did it for us. And part of this cross, part of this saving act is now given to us to carry. As I have forgiven, I ask all of you, he says to us this morning, to forgive. To not be that judgmental, ugly person. To kind of defy society. That's what we're called to do. I'm called to do that. I fail, we all do. But we're going to try step by step. Maybe today there's someone I can reconcile with. Just a grin, a smile, something or other. And so we ask God to do that this morning. Please, God. And when we're giving you a ride on the way home in the machine, we can forgive each other. So, thanks for one guy laughed.